Good evening. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, nearly 60 million adults in the US had received mental health treatment in 2022. And according to Front Psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, a verbal communication method, is currently the most effective and common form of therapy. Apologies. Sure. Cognitive behavioral therapy is an incredibly valuable tool in helping for victims of trauma to be able to come to terms and rationalize their experiences. And while it's not necessarily a cure, it's incredibly helpful in helping people to get past the sort of mental paralysis that trauma creates in your mind. A wall that kind of blocks your capabilities of seeing the future. And but there are limitations to it. Limitations in the form of what happens when you come across someone who's been marred by such a violent, traumatic experience, and they can't put their emotions or experiences into words, where everything kind of falls apart in experiencing something like that. My name is Amar Muratovic, and I'm the son of refugees as a result of the Bosniak genocide that occurred nearly 3 decades ago. An experience that included things like beheadings, torture, premature burials, mass executions, and all sorts of terrifying things beyond my own cognition. And it really marred the community. After something like this happens, there's all sorts of issues. Many Bosniak families were just relocated to different places around the world, but it wasn't a solution. It wasn't a solution because you carry these new issues with you now. You've just been ripped away from your home, your job, everything that you've built up all these years. And now you have this added trauma and these issues with many people in our community develop things like post-traumatic stress disorder, insomnia, manic depression, severe anxiety. And that just doesn't go away. And being in a new land just adds stress on top of it. My family relocated to Hartford, Connecticut, where I had the unique experience of being able to grow up and watch the community to also grow and also struggle in finding their place. And at least with my parents worked several jobs each in order to be able to give my brother and I a future that was ripped from them. Something that I couldn't imagine ever having to do. But it wasn't as successful, because my parents also kind of used that as a form of coping, where if you're worked to the bone, you don't necessarily have to think about or worry about any of this stuff regarding your trauma. But instead, the added stress compounded and it created a significantly worse time for them and worsened their condition. But this was the reality for a lot of people in the community. People either having these faulty coping mechanisms or none at all. Except for one person that comes to mind. And that person was my grandmother. See, my grandmother carried this trauma and all these events happening with her, but she also brought with her her knowledge, her culture, her tradition, all these things with her. And through the expression of things like weaving these beautiful woven rugs called chillings, crocheting clothing, especially baby clothing, and knitting gloves, scarves, and these different accessories, they were all techniques that she learned in Bosnia, and they were kind of ways to bring her back to reality. And eventually, my mom would also follow suit, especially in creating and collaborating on creating these beautiful pieces. Whether they were chillings, whatever form that they could express themselves in, things that they brought back from Bosnia with them. And eventually they were invited to things like farmers markets or different events, not only to sell their work, but to share their culture and everything from across the globe. One that might not be there anymore soon. And I always remember, whenever I'd go with my grandma on some of these trips, people would go up to her and ask her, "This is beautiful. Did you go to school for this? Is there a school in Bosnia for this?" She would always give off a little chuckle and say, "I learned from my mother, and she from hers, and she from hers, and she from hers. There was no school. You didn't go to school for it. It's all passed down. It was all familiar." And on top of being a valuable coping mechanism, it was also a phenomenal way to kind of get a glimpse or look through a window into what they were actually feeling. You see, besides commissions, they didn't necessarily put a lot of time and effort into thinking about these series or pieces that they would be making. It was kind of more of they woke up and they say, "Well, I know how to make a goat. I kind of want to do that today." But this goat is also representative of goats that she would care for or tend to, like the ones that she did in Bosnia, all before the war and the genocide. They were a direct connection to her life before. And not only with this, but these beautiful chilling patterns and designs that she fondly remembers her own mother holding and guiding her hands through making. And it's a phenomenal case study in watching someone move through the stages of grief regarding any trauma. This piece is a memorial quilt in the form of a chilim, depicting these beautiful decorative squares, these unique traditional designs, and the names of relatives who had passed as a result of the war and genocide. People that aren't coming back, who are gone, that you grew up with, you lived with. On the surface, it emanates grief. It's hard to look at this and knowing that it's a piece about the genocide and thinking positively of it. But it's also a piece of acceptance. Putting something like this out into the world is you saying to the world that I accept that this happened. That these people are no longer with us, but we're right now living a life without these people. There is a time beyond them. And that for them is the crack in that wall. To be able to see a future beyond this trauma. And to me, seeming to be like a final stage in grief that we can see. It's a beautiful case study in seeing art and its application outside of the field of arts. Where, in things like psychology and psychologists are adopting certain things like imaginal exposure, which essentially is trying to represent your trauma and expressing it through art in some manner. Whether it's literally painting red on a canvas or drawing whatever shapes on a page. Just letting your mind and your body autonomously produce something. And we could see that through the work that my grandmother and my mother made. Because if you went way back when, or you asked them even now, what they were thinking when they were choosing to make these specific pieces, how they decided on some of these things, it would kind of give you a blank stare and say, I decided in the moment, in the day, what I was going to make. Because that's kind of how it was. If it wasn't a commission, it wasn't necessarily planned out. I'm going to do this piece, and then this piece will be a series. No. Over time, without saying anything, we got immense, deep, emotional expression through art. And looking back, this all makes sense, why they felt like this. The goats relating to her life before the war and genocide, the patterns and remembering her mother fondly, all these things that they weren't thinking of at the time, but it showed itself. It expressed itself. And as for the rest of the Bosniak community, at least in Hartford, annually in July, they do a march to remember Srebrenica, which is where the genocide had occurred in Bosnia. They have a march to remember the people that they lost, and to remember and come to terms with what happened. As for them, they were marching towards a new future, a life beyond their trauma. And as for art, with my grandmother and mother, art created that possibility for them. Art was their bridge to life. Thank you.